Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar, the role technology could play in helping Greater Manchester build back better. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us. We are just going to hang fire a minute or two just to allow attendees to continue to join us. We can see people coming in now. So yeah, if you just want to wait a minute or two and then we'll get going shortly. Hi everyone, if you're just joining us now, I can see the numbers nicely starting to increase. We are just going to hang fire another minute or two just to give everyone the opportunity to get logged on. So good afternoon everybody, we'll make a start. I'm Sean Gibb, I'm the Events and Marketing Manager here at Pro Manchester. Thank you for joining today's session and I'm delighted to welcome you to it, which is the roundtable discussion, the role technology could play in helping Greater Manchester to build back better. We have an exciting panel today who will introduce themselves shortly, representing hopefully ABGI, Appleyard Lees, Slalom, Manchester Digital, and of course our host is Kimberly Waldron, Managing Director at Sky Parlour. Following today's session, I'll send out a post-event email which will contain any post-event collateral, links to where you can find out about other Pro Manchester events and our new Pro Manchester YouTube channel, so you can view this and other webinars back. It'll also contain a feedback form. So if you could fill this in, it really is helpful to us to continue to improve our offerings. And it's also a place for you to suggest ideas of what you'd like to see on future webinars. So please do just take a couple of minutes to fill it in. Please be aware that this webinar is being recorded. And please make use of the chat function. It's the sort of two boxes overlapping each other with a question mark in. You can ask questions, make comments, observations, and then we'll address as many of those as possible throughout the hour. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Kimberly.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you to everybody for joining. It's great to see the Pro Manchester community continue to come together during this difficult time or challenging time that we're still facing. It's no revelation to say that technology has long been shaping how we all live our daily lives, but recent months has seen the acceleration not only of the innovation of new technologies, but the adoption of these by many of us as we kind of use this as an online lifeline during this period. And now's the time we're all turning towards returning to near normal, as I'll call it. And we're here today to discuss the role technology has to play for all of us when it comes to that, and especially when building back better and getting back into Manchester. So welcome to each of our panelists. I'll turn over to them to introduce themselves, and if you could kick us off by telling us a little bit about how each of your organisations has dealt with COVID so far, and perhaps touch on what role technology's played there. I'll come to you, Katie, first, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you, Kimberly, and thank you very much for inviting me today. So obviously we're a membership organisation in a similar structure to Pro Manchester. and very focused on digital and technology businesses. We obviously had to pivot everything to online. So we were actually, before COVID, we were spending an enormous amount of time on education programmes. So we run some programmes to get schoolgirls interested in technology, our digital herb programme. So that was lots of road shows in every single borough of Greater Manchester. So we obviously altered lesson plans, moved all of those things to online. And obviously the needs of our members changed very, very quickly. And we had to respond to that as well. So all of our events have moved online. But more than that, we found the demand, especially from smaller companies, was about supporting staff and supporting remote working, looking at how do you help companies hire online. And there was also a huge demand for wellbeing and mental health support. So we created a whole new range of events and support services to try and help some of our members navigate through that. And I think that probably about covers it for us.
Great, well, thank you. And Ian, come to you next, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Kimberly. My name's Ian Davis. I'm a partner in Appleyard Lee's IP. We're a patent and trademark firm, so we help our clients protect their innovations and their branding. So my background in particular is in electronic engineering and telecoms, computer software, that kind of thing. But we have people who look after clients working in different sectors. So medical devices is obviously very apposite at the moment, biotechnology, pharmaceuticals, and they're all involved with clients, many of whom are actively trying to address the COVID situation at the moment. In terms of our own experience at the moment, we went from having 120 odd people in our offices. We're based in Manchester, Halifax, Leeds and Cambridge. So each one is a sort of self-sufficient office, if you like. And we've gone from all of those people essentially being office-based, occasionally working from home, to being permanently working from home. So we had a skeleton staff in the office. So we've been dependent, as everyone has been, on tools such as Teams and Zoom to keep things ticking over. So it's remarkable how quickly everyone's adjusted. I think in many ways it's changed the way that we work forever. I can't see that we will ever go back to being quite the same firm that we were beforehand. So we've often been paper light, but I think this has really forced the issue where we'll essentially be paperless. I've not printed anything for 3 or 4 months now. I've got several screens here set up at home, and it's dead easy to work this way. And I think that's the way we'll continue to work, whether we're in the office or at home. So it's a challenging time, but I think we personally have adjusted quite well, and I hope that we're helping our clients do the same.
Great, thanks Ian. Paul, come to you.
Yeah, hi, so I'm Paul Squire. I work with Slalom. Slalom's a modern consulting organisation focused on strategy, technology and business transformation. We're a relatively new organisation. We consider ourselves to have been born digital, so we don't have some of the kind of legacy challenges of some of the more established organisations. We also consider ourselves to be a multi-generational business, so we kind of think long term. We think about kind of the organisation that we're creating for our children's children, as opposed to just the people that are working with us now. Yeah, and that people centricity really helped us to frame our response to COVID. So we've got an aspiration actually for to create a world in which everyone can love their life and love their future. So again, kind of helps us to frame what we did as an organisation. So yeah, we immediately came out with a strategy which was 2 parts. One, look after our people, and the second, look after our business. And as a result, we made a decision very early on: no redundancies. We weren't going to take advantage of furlough, and that we would use the people we had in our organisation to focus on supporting the communities and building a better business for the future. I guess we're relatively fortunate in that most of the work that we do, we can do relatively easily remotely. We already work in global teams and dispersed projects, so we're familiar with some of the tools. But it's been interesting as our clients have become more comfortable working in that environment, how our understanding and our tool set has accelerated as well in terms of what we use as an organisation. I guess the immediate response for us was that some projects just stopped when we went into lockdown, but we've seen lots of organisations kind of moving into the next phase and starting to think about accelerating their move towards digital, scaling operations, moving online, aligning their processes and their workforces around the digital capabilities. So we foresee ourselves working remotely for probably the next 6 months before we start to move back into offices. There's a lot of focus, same as Katie, really around making sure that we connect as a team and we look after each other as individuals as well as supporting our clients.
Thank you. I think you raised a couple of really interesting points there that I think we'll probably come to as we go through the discussion around the difference between digitising business as usual to make sure that happens versus adopting new digital strategies and moving into like a period of innovation and actually improvement. I know that all the guests and most businesses at the moment have been focusing on that. How do we maintain business as usual and how do we keep continuity and maintain well-being? And now we're hopefully looking forward to a future where we can become perhaps a bit more like yourself, Paul, saying you're more digital native. We're all being forced into that position to think like digital natives now, because we won't be going back to the more analog approach. So, okay, well, Katie, I'm come back to you if that's okay, because I'm really interested to hear from you about anything to do with your members and if you've had anything you can share around how they've perhaps been adopted. I mean, you represent the digital community right in the heart of Manchester. I'm sure you've seen a variety of initiatives and methods and perhaps some good, perhaps some bad across your membership base. It'd be great if you could share some of those with us. Okay.
So, I mean, obviously pre-COVID, the digital and tech scene was absolutely booming. We saw Paul's company open an office here in the last couple of years. Obviously, Amazon opened an office, GCHQ. The great thing is that some of those things are unaffected, so that helps. But it's safe to say that the tech industry isn't immune from economic shock, although it's obviously much better placed than a lot of industries to recover from it. So we've seen, so initially, I think the shock of lockdown and everything else, we saw quite a lot of our small businesses suffer. Again, like Paul said, depending on where some of those companies are in the supply chain, and especially service-based business, contracts got cancelled. We've seen, I think 3/4 of our members expect revenues to be down on previous years. But that said, the last couple of months, we've definitely seen the wheels start to kind of move again, and we've seen a bit more optimism in the sector. And I think, again, with the larger corporates where their markets have flatlined, obviously they've been struggling. But in between that, I think, as you've already pointed out, COVID has just meant that the move to digital transformation is massively accelerated. And actually, some of our businesses are really, really benefiting from those traditional industries needing to innovate, needing services. So when I kind of flatten all of that out and look at these bits are a bit squeezed, but we see some growth here, I think the overall picture is, there's still going to be growth in the digital and technology sector. It's probably just not going to be at the pace and scale that we've seen. And I think there's still quite a lot to be optimistic about. I think we have to be optimistic about this. I'm normally Debbie Downer on these things, pointing out all the things that could go wrong. But given that the importance of and the talent we have in our sector and the way that our businesses can impact other sectors, I think we have to be positive and we have to see how we can pull some of the other industries through with us.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, really good point. That the tech sector, everybody's looking to the tech sector to help us through this, but they're also businesses themselves that are having to adapt and work through it. Paul, what from in your role, what challenges are businesses having that you're seeing when we are trying to make a step towards returning to normal? Have you seen have you seen this differ across sectors? Sorry.
It definitely varies across sectors. I just picking up on Katie's point there. I think we hear less about the war for talent, and I know people are concerned about unemployment. But I think we talk about the tech sector, but every business is a technology business nowadays. It's really just a question of what you're applying that technology towards. And I think Manchester has made huge strides over the last few years around building that technical digital capability and attracting talent. into Manchester. I think that there's going to continue to be a war for that talent and to compete to bring the best people in. And I suspect we'll be in a situation where there'll be kind of a two-paced kind of economy where large parts of the economy are struggling. Their revenue has been challenged, or the business models are really under stress. But at the same time, we're struggling to find the right talent with the right skills to be able to support kind of the evolution and the digital transformation that that businesses need. I think most businesses, and I'd be interested to see what others have to say on this, but I think most businesses have sort of entered into a three-phase or taken a three-phase approach. So we ourselves talked about protect, restore, and then accelerate as our three phases. And protect, the initial response phase, sort of ended at the end of April-ish. And being a largely US organisation, it's kind of interesting seeing what's happening over there, and that we moved into restore in the US and started thinking about when we might start to reopen offices. Yeah, obviously we're not quite in the accelerate phase yet, and I think a lot of the activity at the moment, a lot of the technology actually is probably more focused around the safety aspects and protecting people from the downside of coronavirus, rather than on the the second and third phases around kind of surviving as businesses, and then thriving, taking the next step and moving towards acceleration. So I think it varies across different sectors, but I think those three phases are pretty similar in all sectors. Just a question of how quickly you can move from one to the next. And I think we will see that some of the sectors will have more dramatic changes in terms of the way that they operate going forwards than others. So you can think about medicine as an example, where the way we go and visit a doctor may have changed forever. You think about education, online education, higher education. Obviously retail and online retail. There are some sectors I think that which will never go back to anywhere close to where they were previously.
And I guess that leads us into coming back to Ian. You mentioned that for your business it's been a positive in many ways, in terms of going online, the technical aspect of there's been.
I think that there's been plus points. I think it's I think as Katie said, trying not to be Debbie Downer about it. I think it's very easy to get sort of weighed down in how bad things can be. And I know for obviously people who've been directly affected, it's terrible. But for those of us who are trying to sort of muddle through, there have been some good points. I think the lack of a commute is a great thing for me. Spending more time with my kids is a great thing for me. I can be more productive when I'm at home. But I do miss seeing my colleagues. I miss, like you said, those water cooler chats, the chances to catch up on day-to-day stuff. And I think you miss that collaborative approach, because as great as this digital technology is in making you communicate with people, it's not quite as immediate as just sticking your head around someone's door and having a chat for 2 minutes. By the time you've picked up a phone or plugged in your headset and had a chat for 2 minutes on Zoom, it feels somehow more intrusive. You're actually literally in their house. It seems like you're being more of an imposition on them. So I think as soon as we can get back to having that kind of easy interaction you can have by being there in person, that the better it will be for everyone. And certainly for our clients who work in the R&D space, where they rely on collaboration, they have to be together in teams. If you're working in a lab, I can take my computer home, I can work. I can't take my lab equipment home. I can't start synthesizing chemicals. I can't start building circuit boards. Those things are very, very difficult to do from home. So it's easy for us as a business to work in this way, but for our clients, they're seeing a very different spin on things. I mean, many of them have embraced it, and many of them have been pushed, as we have, into a realm where they are being much more digital, if they weren't already. But for some, it's a much bigger problem. And I think we are trying to change our working practices to accommodate them. We interact very differently with the people that we're looking at clients in one direction and patent offices and other law firms in another direction. So the patent offices, the UK Patent Office, for instance, we deal with them all the time. Until very recently, they sent everything out by paper. So we would literally get paper into our office, we'd scan it and email it to our clients. And this has forced them to go electronic. So they've got a skeleton crew at their office in Newport, scanning paper and sending us PDFs rather than putting things in the post. And it's taken an event of this magnitude for them to embrace the digital technology they should have perhaps done years ago. So, that will change the way they work forever, which will change the way that we work, which will change the way we work with our clients. So, the after effects of this are going to be enormous for everybody.
I mean, you mentioned one example there, but of course there's similar examples, and Paul touched on a couple in the healthcare sector. There's certain types of processes that have been forced to improve. Who do you think will be reap the long-term benefits?
I mean, these sort of long-established clients. I mean, we as a business work for sort of big corporate clients, SMEs down to individuals, as well as foreign law firms who are themselves acting for corporates, SMEs, or individuals. So we have a variety of different clients. So the big corporate clients we act for, regardless of the sector they're in, that they seem to be weathering it pretty well. That they're coping quite well. The SMEs are either really struggling or really thriving. There doesn't seem to be an awful lot of in between. Individuals are perhaps sort of biding their time a little bit at the moment and conserving their cash while they see how things go. I think people with spare cash at the moment are perhaps rare. And if they're going to make a speculative investment in a new invention, this perhaps isn't the right time for them. But having said that, every time we see some kind of natural calamity, if we see flooding, we get loads of inquiries about people with new flood prevention devices or things for soaking up floods, whatever it might be. In the same way, we get loads of inquiries from people now who've got new sanitization procedures. On the more sort of high-tech biotech side of things, there are people looking at new pharmaceuticals, new drug treatments, and so on, which is way outside my expertise, but that is clearly happening at a pace. And I think it is pushing people who can embrace this and make something positive out of this awful situation are going to do very well. Those who want to cling to the old ways are going to struggle, clearly, because I don't think we will, certainly not in the medium term, return to anything like normality. So if we were working for instance, an aerospace company, we don't have any aerospace companies in our client base, they're going to be struggling, clearly. There's not a lot of people going to be investing in new aircraft at the moment, but people investing in new digital communication technology, new pharmaceuticals, new sanitization things, even companies that make new sign making devices for, marking out spaces on the floor or signs for the windows telling you to wash your hands more regularly. Those are the kind of businesses, if they can do that in an innovative, insightful way, that they're going to make an awful lot of money out of this potentially and make things better for the rest of us.
Yeah, and I guess you touched on it there as well. General improvement to the lives of consumers or the general population, and it's certainly the leap into technology and online has brought to the fore issues of digital inclusion, financial inclusion, and hopefully things there are going to continue to improve, especially in the financial services sector, who've really had to step up during this crisis. And Katie, do you have any examples perhaps that you could think where the deployment of technology has really made a huge difference, or is really winning right now?
So I think we have a few, and I think probably looking at some of the companies that have done well through COVID, the drivers that led them to do well through COVID might not be the same drivers that helped them to do well or not so well through a recession. So we've kind of been in an odd bubble. So I mean again, we're talking about financial payments, the acceleration of contactless, and the acceleration of really small businesses. I mean, I live in Urmston and we have a monthly market. And walking through that a couple of weeks ago and seeing every single vendor who was cash only actually having contactless technology as part of their business has been quite amazing. And, we've seen some quite entrepreneurial activity with our SMEs in terms of them going out and finding business that need digitizing. And maybe if they'd gone and had the conversation 6 months ago, it would have been we're busy with whatever it is. We're busy with our new conveyor belt right now. Come back in 6 months and talk to me about e-commerce. And so we've seen, a lot of stuff happening, and even just small things like people that had a website putting an e-commerce module on there. And then we've seen other small companies pivoting entirely and building apps that support social distancing and actually are looking at some of those short-term things. So. And we're seeing, obviously, there's going to be a massive change in fixed costs for companies. We're seeing people that have got rid of their offices altogether. That might be a bit premature, but for some people that's going to work. Obviously, so that frees up a massive, next to people, that's your next big cost. So actually, the way these companies will do business, what they need to make to survive, all of those touch points are going to dramatically alter over the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah. Exactly, and we've just had actually had a question come in that's pretty relevant from one of our guests at the moment. So if that's okay, I think it's a good time to raise it to the panel. How do you see technology shifting the narrative for key workers who have continued to work at the front end of supply chains, retail, food, NHS? There's a lot of chat about flexible working, but how are we considering the world of work for the majority of people in frontline roles, and how will technology help there? Perhaps if Ian, if you look like you've got some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, I mean, hats off to everyone working a frontline role who hasn't been able to step back from this and work from home. I mean, right from the people who drop your food off at the door to doctors and nurses working at the real sharp end. I mean, there's a limit to what we can do from a technology point of view to replace all of those roles with robots or automation. But, you know, there are things that can be done. I think, you know, a lot of our clients will be looking at, if not automation, to make those jobs, you know, safer, but by removing people from them, is to make the people who are doing those roles as safe as possible. So whether it's improved PPE, improved automation for sort of supermarkets doing pack and pick type applications, those are all things where technology is clearly going to play a key role. But the downside of that, and you touched on employment, is that there's a good chance that automation in any of those roles will impact employment. You know, you can see that the more people Ocado have out driving vans is great, but all of those vans are being fed by robots from their mass picking centres. So there's a trade-off here between making it safer for people and providing employment potentially. So the people who can either reskill or embrace different areas of work within their current role are going to win from this, I think. If you're in a customer-facing role and you simply can't do that because of the way we're all socially distancing, then that's going to have some serious impacts on people's work. And I think it's fascinating to see how that is going to change. I mean, looking at restaurants and bars and people in the hospitality business, that requires that face-to-face contact. Whether that can be improved to a point where people can get out and enjoy themselves again and maintain employment for those people is a huge challenge. And technology can play some part in that. Some of this will come down to psychology, how people feel about actually being out and exposing themselves to others in these sort of situations.
Does anybody else have anything to add there on that?
So I think we've seen a sort of a move from maybe before lockdown where it was sort of humans versus machines. I think there's been a general recognition that actually we can be really quite effective working together. So yeah, yes, it's you know, robots and automation can pose threats to frontline workers and challenge some of the jobs in society. I guess the flip side of it is that it can also potentially reduce costs and make businesses more viable. Yeah, but we've also recognised that actually technology can play a huge part in all of our lives and really change the way that we that we live. You know, even thinking about the acceleration of technology and even some of the established technologies and how quickly things have changed. I mean, yeah, we're all using Teams now. We were using Teams as an organisation before lockdown started. I went and did a little bit of research, a number of releases of Teams that have come out since the beginning of March. You know, if you can remember back to the days when we all started looking at Zoom because Teams couldn't get more than a couple of people and their pictures on it, and then Zoom had a background, and suddenly the background appeared on Teams, and now you can get 250 people on the Teams screen. You know, even some of the established technologies have really accelerated. You know, to meet the needs of society.
Thanks, Paul. Just following on from actually both of what you said and from the point around employment, we've had another question from a guest that I think again is relevant here, rather than waiting for a Q&A at the end. So put it back to all of you. Do you see a hiccup going forward where young people leaving colleges, perhaps not going to university and taking a year out, because of what's happening and because of the challenges around possible challenges around employment, would this create possible skills gaps? And are there ways in which organisations can deal with this now? And perhaps what actions are you taking within your own organisations to tackle this? Katie, if you've got some thoughts on it.
I have, because we spend a lot of time on this, and obviously one of the things that we were concerned about with COVID is we've seen lots of our, and again I'm talking from a technology industry perspective, even in a sector we still expect to grow, we've seen companies slash the amount of graduates they're going to take, decide not to take apprenticeships. So businesses will squeeze the opportunities available to college leavers and early years talent. So there is a real risk that obviously as the economy bounces back, we end up in a situation with that severe skills shortage that we had pre-COVID in our industry. And also it's really, really important that we haven't done enough reaching far enough down into colleges and schools to make those people understand what opportunities our industry can deliver. So I think there's a massive piece to do with young people, especially now, helping to build their confidence. And, you know, there's an onus on employers to make sure that they, as much as they can, where they can, they're still offering those work experience opportunities and those placements, because we have to have some long-term thinking around this.
Paul or Ian, anything to add to that?
I guess the only thing for me is that there are lots more routes into employment today than just going to university, in my mind. So I think making people aware of those different routes, and as businesses supporting young people, as Katie says, as they follow through those routes, and invest in them and believe in them as people. It'd be easy for us to people who've been around, fortunate to have been around for a little bit longer, to sort of write off a generation, and I really need to not do that.
I think when I met Katie, that you touched on the point, I might have misheard this, that actually perhaps apprenticeships, internships are going to become more appealing because you can get good, educated or well-trained resource for less cost into a business. So there may be some opportunities there if businesses are looking to perhaps skim their employment costs. There is, if everybody's educated to the right level on both sides, there perhaps will be some opportunities there to make sure that apprenticeships, internships are kept afloat.
Yeah, I have very strong views on this. So I was actually really disappointed when Boris Johnson or Rishi or whoever it was announced the £2,000 grant for businesses. I think that's great if it does help, but if in our, and again, I'm speaking about the technology industry, it's probably very different in other industries, but I think if a £2,000 grant makes a difference between whether or not you take on an apprentice or not, you really shouldn't be taking them on, because there's so much more to, the whole point of an apprenticeship is it will impact your productivity. They do need a lot more support and help. You get the rewards out of the other end, but it's not really, it shouldn't be a financial conversation. And I think that's kind of where you can go down a bit of a wormhole. And internships, I think some work experience, a couple of weeks here and there is fine, but again, paying internships matters massively, because obviously our industry has a massive diversity problem. Doing free internships perpetuates a lot of those issues, because you're not widening the net enough for other people, and people that wouldn't normally consider the tech industry, who are the people we want to get to, and that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important actually that those opportunities are well paid, they are done for the right reasons, and that's, again, sorry employers, that's very much on the employers to make those things happen. Yeah,
I'm glad we gave you the opportunity to put your viewpoint across there, because I agree with you. I think it's really important, and also, what better time when technology is as important as it is to bring on the digital native generation a lot of the time as well. I'm just going to, I've got a few other questions, good questions as well, that I think might come into play just a little bit further on in the conversation. So I just want to go back to some of the questions that we kind of looked to cover off, and actually one of the questions that we've had from the guests, will come back to that. Cybersecurity is a topic that is, I would argue that we're all kind of on the front line now when it comes to tackling cybersecurity, as small business owners, as business leaders, leading our business lives online. There are more threats than ever before, especially as you said, smaller retailers jumping online, taking orders now when coffee shops weren't open. Loads of examples of businesses very quickly digitizing to maintain some level of turnover during this period. Ian, what do you think about the increased level of cyber threat, and how, a business from, I know you work with larger organisations, how are they dealing with this? Because we're all in the same boat.
I think, yeah, it's a key issue. I think with people working from home, obviously in our business, we're dealing with confidential information for clients day in, day out. It's a key part of what we do for them. We're dealing with inventions that have never seen the light of day, and if they do go public, it destroys that possibility of getting a patent for that client. So it's built into the core of what we do as a business, is to keep our clients' secrets, very, very fiercely. So working from home does pose a risk, but we've been very, very careful, as I mentioned before, to go as paperless as possible. We're encouraging staff not to print things off and leave them lying around their house. We don't know people's own domestic situations. The kids pick up a piece of paper and start scribbling on it, take it to show a friend or something, and suddenly something secret has been disclosed because it's got something confidential on the back of it. So we store all our information on secure servers. Nothing is stored on our local PC. Everything is on a secure cloud platform. So we're secure as we can be working from home as we are working from the office, so that there aren't the physical bits of paper lying around which contain confidential information. But likewise, to address that issue, many of our clients on the electronic and tech side of things are looking at improved cybersecurity. We've got several clients who work in that realm where they're trying to improve computer security, whether it's simple things like fingerprint identification, or the nuts and bolts that go behind the security that you don't see as a user, the algorithms that enable the security to work properly in the first place and to be more efficient. We work in that kind of domain as well. So several of our clients are looking at that, and I think that the working environments we all find ourselves in are pushing that to the fore again. But you have to be that much more secure. I guess there are bank workers and people who've got access to very, very confidential information working from home. But my wife's a GP. She set up here at the start of lockdown. She could do consultations from home and access client records via a secure login using a system developed by one of our clients. So that was fascinating to see. But obviously there's information on there that is very, very sensitive, and there's an awful lot happening in the background that you and I just never see to make that work effectively and to keep that information confidential.
Yeah, and are you seeing the same thing, Paul, with your client base? Have you seen an increase in interest or requirements around cybersecurity and investment in that space?
Yeah, I think so. I think just generally, a lot of businesses, most of us were caught off guard by COVID-19, and it's kind of really brought to life, how important it is for us to think about the resilience of our businesses. So obviously we've been very focused on health over the last 3 months. I think a lot of the investments that people are making in digital is also thinking about the security and privacy aspects of the resilience of the business, because it's not too difficult to project ourselves into a world where actually the next crisis is a digital crisis as opposed to a health crisis.
Yeah, and especially when it comes down to, I guess, fraud or identity theft, those types of online crimes, we won't see the result of those until months to come, when those identities and data that may have been hacked or stolen starts to be used in various guises.
I guess one of the things that was been in the news recently was the supposed Russian attempt to hijack the Oxford vaccine program, and I think that shows a real life example of where having cybersecurity is really, really important. So again, our clients who are looking at innovation have to keep those things as secure as they possibly can. Once that information is in the public domain, from a patent point of view, it's impossible to get a valid patent once that information has gone public. So I guess there's one thing where a state actor like the Russians, should we say, were trying to infiltrate it for their own reasons, but somebody who wanted to just be, malign and get all that information and publish it could have enormous consequences for all the millions or potentially billions of pounds that's been spent on that research. That organisation would never be able to recoup that money. They'd never be able to get valid protection, and the whole patent system is underpinned on the basis of confidentiality. So, we're very invested in that as a concept and try and do all that we can to help our clients to preserve that.
Katie, you look like you've got something to add there.
So probably at the very, very other end of the spectrum. So as well as running Manchester Digital, I'm a co-founder of the Cyber Resilience Centre, which was set up to protect mainly SMEs in Greater Manchester from cyber attacks. So we only launched in November, so we've been on a bit of a discovery journey, I guess. And I think the thing is, when small businesses read about hacks and cybersecurity and attacks have gone through the roof since COVID. Obviously, people taking advantage of home working, you know, spoofing emails, all sorts of different things. But a lot of companies still think it's this dark, shadowy Russian figure. They don't realise actually it's the people that used to break into your house now break into your computer and steal your money. You know, ransomware demands for 500 quid or whatever percentage of a Bitcoin are more and more common, and you know, people think it, and it's the basics that companies aren't doing. And I think one of the things we found during COVID was trying to reach out to some of these businesses and say, you know, you need to think about some of the basic kind of 10 government NCSC steps. Most companies don't have 5 of them kind of covered, but actually trying to talk to them about cyber while they were like, but we're all dying of, you know, there's a pandemic, there's all these other terrible things. Please don't tell us there's another terrible thing that's going to happen to us. So it was very, very hard to communicate some of that messaging. So actually the language we use when we're talking to business about cybersecurity is still really important, because it's actually still quite a new concept to a lot of smaller businesses, especially those that are also at the beginning of their transformation journey. So I think we as an industry need to think about how we present some of that without making people too scared to engage, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, but I think what's important about that is it affects everybody. You know, we're all vulnerable to the threat of cybercrime, whether you're the consumer or the end user, an SME or a large corporate or financial institution. It's huge. Like as you say, it's not a dark, shadowy industry. It's often professionals who make a living in that way, and unfortunately have preyed on the vulnerable in all types during this pandemic. I guess it leads us on to something that we touched upon slightly earlier, and something we have had a question on. The digital inclusion that's being accelerated because of COVID-19 has got a lot of positive and creates a lot of opportunities. But some, quite rightly raised by one of our attendees today, is that technology does make a massive difference when opening up access to services, access to financial services. But how does this affect, how do we cope with the fact that we're not all, you know, virtue signaling, we're not all saying, oh, we're doing a great job, because there will be people out there that have hidden disabilities, or you know, for example, video calling. We're all talking about it, but there are barriers to that for many people, perhaps in the deaf community, that are struggling with that. And how can you utilize technology to build a better workplace for everybody? And you know, that's a wide question, but I'd be interested to hear thoughts on it. Katie?
I have some thoughts. So I think this kind of goes back to my point before about diversity in the industry. If you haven't got a diverse mix of people working in technology companies, building video calling platforms and all the other services, you are not going to have diverse products and services coming out of them. So the problem starts at source, and it's something as an industry we really need to get a lot better at, a lot better.
Paul? Ian, you're both nodding. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think we as a profession in the law profession, I mean, so patent attorneys are sort of a strange hybrid beast, that we're part technologists, part lawyers. Neither of those professions are particularly renowned for the diversity, so we've got the worst of both worlds in some ways. And I think, you know, we're acutely aware that we are seen as a very stale, pale and male, and I think we're working very hard to try and change that. There's an organisation called IP, Intellectual Property Inclusive, which is looking to increase diversity and increase inclusion of people from sort of sectors that have been left behind, if you like. They find it very difficult to get into that, and I think it's a lot of recent events have made me question the way that we do things. That sort of unconscious bias, the way that you just tend to recruit people who are a bit like you. You know, I don't think anyone is consciously doing that in a way to be offensive or exclusionary. That's just the way it's been for so long. Now, I think we've made great steps inside our firm to try and improve that, to become more diverse, but there's still more that we can do. And part of that is limited by the CVs that we get in. You know, I overwhelmingly get CVs from potential patent attorneys who are white, middle-class male candidates. That tends to be the way, particularly in the electronics sector. So we're actively looking at ways that we can change that and make a difference. as to how technology can make things better, I saw a really good clip on YouTube the other day about a paramedic who was really concerned about dealing with patients who had hearing difficulties whilst everyone's wearing a cloth face covering. So how do you actually make yourself understood? And there's an app, I think, called Google Transcribe. So he would be talking to the patient, he's holding his phone up at the same time, and it's transcribing his words in real time whilst the patient was unable to read his lips. Simple things like that. You know, Teams does come with an audio subtitling facility. It's not always perfect, but I think in terms of going some of the way to making it more understandable for people who do have difficulty with their hearing, that's perfect. So the technology is getting better all the time, but it will never be completely, it won't make up entirely for people who have difficulties in those sectors. But I think an awful lot of work is going on to make all this technology as inclusive as it can possibly be.
And hopefully things happening again. We can't stop saying that during the COVID-19, because it's happening on such a mass scale. Perhaps we'll get some uniformity or some more collaboration to bring something together that's more of a standard process for dealing with those situations.
And I think it is accelerating the need for all that, isn't it? So you know, it's forcing people to put more effort into this kind of research and not rely on the old way of doing things.
Paul?
I think there's a whole new level of social consciousness which has kind of impacted us all over the last several months. Yeah, what Katie said really resonated with me. I think the important thing is to to continue to try and to encourage people to have a voice, because whether we like it or not, we are biased. We have a narrow frame of reference based on our experience. We can only increase that frame of reference by engaging with people with different backgrounds. So I applaud the person that's asked the question, and I would ask them to challenge and to speak up whenever possible. Yeah,
and I think, again, going back to Katie's point, it is about having diversity baked in. If we're all relying on technology more and more so, if the people creating that technology and innovating is not representative of our communities, then how will that technology perfectly fit? It won't. Coming back on to a point, I know, I do want to bring the conversation round, perhaps to some points of advice or some thoughts around how businesses do tackle and how businesses can deploy technology to get back to a near normal. I just wanted to go back to the idea of the opportunities that are being created. And I think Paul touched on it again just now, is that we're all now brought into this feeling of citizenship. And what's our role in the community, and how can we take this moment in time to be part of that? And perhaps come again to you, Katie, first, is what is the greatest opportunity for technology right now, in terms of improvement, tech for good? The broad question. I think you might be on mute there.
I'm muted. It was probably a good thing, because I was just kind of panicking about what I'm going to say. I mean, again, I think the Black Lives Matter stuff particularly made people think about, how they recruit, how they operate their businesses, and I think, I think one of the things for me is, technology is not an island. We're not an industry in and of itself. Unless the rest of the economy thrives, technology, will be impacted by the same thing. So I think, the biggest opportunity is using that innovation and that really clever thinking about how do we solve some of those big challenges facing us. So, whether it is, finding ways of people gathering safely, ways of, ensuring that education still happens in a really meaningful way. We know that there are some industries that are going to go through disruption, and as Ian said, there are some industries that will never go back to the way they were. We need to play a role in making sure that as we build new ways of doing things, we make sure they are diverse, they are inclusive, and they represent the society we kind of want to all be part of.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Paul, your thoughts on the greatest opportunity?
Yeah, so we've seen a trend recently about people using data to report externally. So it's almost using technology to hold ourselves accountable for what it is that we're looking to achieve. And you can do that as individuals, as individual organisations, or you can do it as a broader society. So an example for us in the US, we've worked with a number of police departments who are publishing information on who they're questioning and some of the interactions they have with the public. So it's just making those interactions highly visible, and making them highly accountable to society as a whole. It's an example, but we're seeing it in public sector and in private sector at the moment.
Yeah. Ian, do you have anything to add?
Well, I was just thinking about the inclusiveness point and how it's baked in and it affects the way you think. And if you don't consider it from the outset, then it's sort of very hard to bolt on later. So I was thinking, just as we were talking of an example I saw of where there's a kind of prejudice built into the design process, where there's an automatic soap dispenser. I don't know if you saw this, it's on the news a while ago, and you put your hand underneath the soap dispenser, it dispenses a certain amount of soap onto your hands, no contact, fantastic. Then it showed this thing where this black guy comes up, puts his hand underneath, and it didn't recognise his skin tone, and it just didn't dispense the soap because it didn't see his hand being there. And you're thinking, well, if that was in an organisation where there were several black employees who could have tried that, that problem would never have come to, it wouldn't have actually hit the market, but it only came to light later on. So that lack of diversity was there from the very beginning, and it ended up producing a prejudiced soap dispenser, through no sort of ill intent. It just wasn't the right kind of environment to spot that problem. So I think it comes down to just changing the way we see things completely to try and take account of these issues.
And I think that comes back to Paul's point about technology and human beings working together, and that you can't have one without the other, really. And it's about culture within those technology businesses to deliver the right sorts of solutions that are going to, for want of a better phrase, level the playing field for us all. I mean, we've talked quite broadly. I think we've covered lots of different angles when it comes to technology and COVID, and I think that shows just what a broad and challenging subject it is to tackle. But how do we bring that back to what's going to happen in Manchester now? How we get businesses back to a better version of themselves? How do we get employees back to feeling comfortable and confident? And do we have some advice for business owners or business leaders in bringing employees on the journey with them, perhaps for new technologies? We've already spoken about Zoom and Teams and how we're already doing that, but what do we foresee in the next 6 months, and how do we make sure that employees are on board with that? Katie, do you have any thoughts on that?
So I mean, probably just building on what we've said, I don't think there's going to be very few companies in the technology industry that go back to the 9 to 5:30, 5 days a week in the office, and not only because they won't allow it. So I think I think over the next few months, especially as companies try and calibrate where they are in terms of economic recovery and what they've got going on, I think we'll see a lot of people testing different things. I think we'll see 6 months of people trialing things, and the people that have obviously given up their offices already may decide that they need a central place for people to feel like they've got a connection. And I think companies trying to build their culture online is going to be quite an interesting challenge for a lot of companies, especially where they are. I think Ian said about it's much easier for established teams to work this way. I think for newer teams trying to find their way through some of this is going to be more challenging. So I haven't answered your question. I have absolutely no idea how to, Kimberly, but there's some rambling thoughts for you.
No, I think you did. I think you made a really good point that it is. Most of us have never been here before. So if we are trying new ways of doing things, new technologies, new systems and processes, maybe some of it will be trial and error, and we have to accept that. And it is about how those new processes, technologies fit with your culture. You can't build them separately. So I think that, I think you did answer the question. I think it's about baking these new technologies into the culture of your business, making sure it fits.
Yeah.
So I guess same question, Paul.
So I think ultimately it all comes down to the broader experience, and I think that's going to be the success factor for Manchester. So I kind of asked myself some questions. If if you can recruit someone from anywhere, why would you recruit someone from Manchester? Or if you're in Manchester and you could work for a company that's based anywhere, why would you want to work for a company that's based in Manchester? You know, if you can shop from home, why would you want to go into the centre of Manchester? I think the answer to all of those questions is the experience that you get. You know, whether it's an office or whether it's a restaurant or whether it's a shopping centre, you know, we need to make sure that the experience is better in Manchester and is differentiated in Manchester, that makes it attractive to people as a whole. So I think that experience factor we'll see increasingly as we start to move into the sort of accelerate phase.
Yeah, and hopefully that's something that Manchester knows how to do well, you know, instinctively, and can bring through into the near normal. Yeah. And Ian, have you got some thoughts on that, on supporting new technologies and processes?
I think supporting new technologies, I'm thinking more from our own business, really. I mean, we make a big thing. So when we recruit people, the patent profession is very heavily focused on London, so that the vast majority of patent attorneys in the UK are located in London. For historic reasons, really, the patent office used to be there, but it moved to Newport in South Wales many years ago. But there's still kind of a certain perceived prestige about being in London, which we always try and counter and say, well, we work for world-class companies from Manchester, Leeds, Halifax and Cambridge. That's not an issue for us. But if as Paul said, if you can work for anyone from home, you know, we could have people living in Manchester working full-time for a London firm or a Munich firm or a New York firm. You know, there's no real tie to being close to your supposed office location anymore. So we always tell ourselves as saying, well, why live in London? Why live the rat race? You could live in the beautiful countryside and be in the office in half an hour, and it's fantastic. That doesn't apply quite so much anymore. So you think, well, what is it that differentiates us from a prospective competitor employer? What do we do that makes it different? We have a certain culture which we hope will persist through COVID and survive and prosper in a different way. But it's going to change the way, if people are genuinely working from home a lot more, then the tie to a physical location is going to be lost. I mean, I haven't been into Manchester for 4 months now, and I miss it. I love Manchester. It's a great place, but the current climate is such that I wouldn't want to be there. How do we get people back into that? What is it that's going to bring people back into that? I don't have the answer. I wish I did, but you know, knowing Manchester as I do, it's going to bounce back stronger than ever, I'm sure. But whether it will be stronger than the rest of the country, I don't know.
And I think, you know, we're coming to the close of this webinar now, but thoughts on that. I was recently a part of a discussion within European banking discussion, and the kind of feeling there was that businesses can do so much when it comes to governments to need to intervene more when it comes to technology, and to put the rails in so that we're not just digitizing general activities. We're actually creating a proper digital future that we're all involved in and can all engage with. But that's I guess another topic for another webinar. You know, what do we need the authorities? How do we need more support in the industries when it comes to the new normal? I think we're close to the end of our time, and I think we've had a very broad and interesting discussion and covered off lots of topics. So thank you to each of the guests. Are there any closing comments? Anything that any points that you feel we missed that you wanted to convey before we close out? No. Well, I'll just end on a positive note then. One of the attendees has said that they have seen that Manchester Deaf Society have been supplying face masks with clear plastic sections, so lips can be read. So that's a positive step forward with something so simple. And I guess that's what technology is there. Technology as a whole is there to do, is to make things easier and simpler, and hopefully we'll proceed forward to a future where that's the case and more inclusive. So thank you to the guests. Thank you, Katie, Paul and Ian. I do have to say, unfortunately, we did have Sandy also, who was due to join us but couldn't make it. But I think that we've covered off some of the points he would have covered off. So thanks again for everyone for joining, and thank you to Pro Manchester for hosting. The session will be made live on YouTube, and Sean will be following up with that in an email.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.